Get ready for death. Today we're going to talk about 4 different types of character deaths and how to implement them. By the way, my name is Brandon McNulty. I'm the author of The Half Murders, and welcome to my writing channel. It's the deadliest month of the year, so I figured we should talk about how to kill off your characters. What we'll do today, we'll discuss the purpose of character deaths, then we'll look at 4 specific types that include examples, and finally we'll wrap up the video with some tips for killing imaginary people. Here's your spoiler warning. The ones in red contain the heaviest spoilers. First off, the whole point of a character death is impact, whether it means impacting the audience, the story world, or other characters. Death can crush us, inspire us, or even make us laugh, but if you write a death scene that fails to create emotion, you're doing it wrong. Now, in order to generate emotional impact, first we need to establish a character, show who they are, what they want, and why they want that particular goal. This creates emotional stakes, and when the character dies later on, those stakes create meaning and emotion. Death might permanently destroy what they represent, or their death might compel other characters to pick up the torch and continue from there. Now let's look at the 4 basic types of character deaths. The first one is the tragic death. This is when you promise hope and you deliver despair. It evokes sadness in the audience. It often feels unfair or unnecessary, especially if it's a death that could have been prevented, and it should have major impact on the story and the surviving characters. Game of Thrones comes to mind here, particularly with Ned Stark. Ned is established as a man of honor and integrity, and his journey involves him trying to expose the corrupt Lannister family. We root for him to succeed, but our hope is met with despair when Joffrey orders Ned's execution. It's a shocking, tragic death, and it prompts his son Robb Stark to seek justice. But instead, Robb meets his own tragic death, which guts the audience and sends shockwaves across the story world. Second type of death is the heroic death. This is when you promise despair and deliver hope or relief. It evokes bittersweet feelings in the audience because we don't want to see the character die, yet we're glad they performed that heroic act. It often involves sacrifice, courage, or redemption, and it inspires characters to survive or live better lives. Probably the best example of this is Boromir from Lord of the Rings. In Fellowship of the Ring, he's introduced as a noble who's passionate about his kingdom of Gondor. In hopes of protecting the kingdom from destruction, Boromir suggests embracing the ring's power. Later, he finds himself tempted by the ring, so much so that he betrays the Fellowship by trying to take it from Frodo. In the end, however, Boromir redeems himself through death. He attempts to protect Merry and Pippin from a horde of orcs, and despite taking multiple arrows to the chest, he keeps fighting while waiting for reinforcements to arrive. His heroic death not only redeems him, but it also inspires the audience as well as the other members of the Fellowship. Third type of death is the satisfying death. This is when you make us wish a character would die, then you deliver that death in a satisfying way. It evokes relief, joy, or even laughter in the audience. It usually involves the hero killing the villain, or a villain killing an annoying side character, and it might serve as a moment of triumph, or it might make a villain appear threatening. In terms of triumph, remember the guy who killed John Wick's dog? Yeah, when John Wick kills him and his friends, those are some satisfying deaths. Same with Joffrey Baratheon and Ramsay Bolton from Game of Thrones. It's easy to hate those guys, and when they finally get what they deserve, it's satisfying. Now, as I mentioned, sometimes it can be satisfying when a villain kills an obnoxious side character. We see this in Die Hard when Hans Gruber shoots Ellis, the annoying yuppie. Not only is Ellis's death played up for comedic effect, but it also makes Hans Gruber appear charismatic and more threatening. This technique also works for monsters. Jurassic Park uses it when the Dilophosaurus kills Dennis Nedry. Aliens uses it when a xenomorph kills Burke. And the Terrifier movies use this all the time. Art the Clown repeatedly butchers annoying characters in gruesome fashion, and if you have a dark sense of humor like me, you'll probably be laughing along with him as he slaughters his victims. Finally, we have our 4th type, the conflicted death. This is a death that has multiple layers of meaning or moral complexity. It fills the audience with mixed emotions, especially if we may want or even need a character to commit murder, but at the same time we don't want them to get their hands dirty, or we don't want to see them abandon their morals, or whatever it may be. This type may include tragic, heroic, or satisfying elements. It might be a situation where a character must commit murder against their will, and these deaths often involve revenge, blackmail, or brutal decisions. One example comes from The Godfather when Michael Corleone kills Sollozzo and McCluskey. Lebowski. Early on, Michael is an innocent civilian, but after his father gets shot, Michael feels compelled to protect his family. We understand him and maybe even root for him to kill these guys, but at the same time, we hate to see him betray his morals. A similar example comes from the standalone Joker film from 2019. Arthur Fleck is introduced as this guy who keeps getting beaten down by society, and we sympathize with him and we root for him to stand up for himself, but things get complicated when he starts killing the people who push him around. Finally, in the TV series 24, Jack Bauer often has to kill people against his will, whether it's because of the situation or another character forces him to. One of the show's most memorable scenes comes in season 3 when Jack has to execute his boss, Ryan Chappelle. Terrorists threaten to release a weaponized virus if Jack doesn't comply, and when his allies fail to locate the terrorists, Jack is left with an impossible choice. Alright, now before we wrap up this video, I want to give you 3 tips for killing off your characters. And these tie in with those 4 types we just went over. First tip is to mix in different types of death scenes. If every death is tragic, then tragedy will lose its impact. For that reason, we want to find ways to deliver multiple types of death, especially in large-scale stories. Not only will this keep things fresh and keep the audience engaged, but it will add emotional complexity to the story as we're taken through a variety of highs and lows. Second tip, use the idea of setup and payoff to maximize impact. Think of life and death as a form of setup and payoff. Life is the setup, death is the payoff. When planning out your stories, decide which type of death a character will suffer, then figure out the best setup that can build toward it. There are plenty of possibilities, but keep the big picture in mind. Remember, death is a payoff, and a payoff is only as strong as its setup. So if you're aiming to create emotion, make sure you do the legwork to establish a character and their goals and motivations before you kill them off. Finally, tip number 3 is to let death shape or reshape the story. Death's impact should spread beyond a single scene. Sometimes a death does more damage in the aftermath when we see how it affects the story world and characters' lives. This is especially true when it comes to an off-screen death. Though the audience won't experience it, it can still have impact by raising questions, calling characters to action, and creating a ripple effect. For example, right now I'm playing the remake of Silent Hill 2, and the story opens with a man named James receiving a letter from his wife who's been dead for 3 years. The letter invites him to meet her in Silent Hill, and it raises a number of questions. Is the letter fake? Is James losing his mind? Is his wife really dead? And we have to wonder, what else is waiting for him in Silent Hill? And why are other people drawn to this mysterious town? In order to get answers, James has to battle through a nightmarish world as well as his own grief. And all of this is built from an off-screen death that impacts the main character and raises questions that he and the audience want answered. So I hope this helps. Question of the day, what character death impacted you the most? Let us know in the comments section below. Thank you for watching. If you want to support the channel, please pick up a copy of any one of my books and be sure to leave reviews on Amazon. The Half Murders is great if you like horror stories. It's about a woman and her daughter who enter a haunted house. They get chopped in half, and for them, the nightmare is only beginning. Also, be sure to check out my other videos, like, share, and subscribe. Maybe support me on Patreon. And as always, remember to keep on writing.